the name of God in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. This morning we are very blessed to have Patti come as our guest preacher. So Patti, as many of you know, is the Executive Director of Monmouth County IHN, Interfaith Hospitality Network. And because we just happen to be focusing on our outreach ministries during the stewardship time at St. Mary's, Patti's visitation was even more perfectly timed. And so I ask you to please open your hearts and listen to what she has to say. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So first, my thank yous to all of you at St. Mary's for all you already do in sharing your love with the least of his, especially to Jesse and Mike and Lynn, who just creating a home here every few months for our families to call home, and orchestrating the many moving parts and hosting our neighbors in need. But also to you, Mother Victoria, and asking me to do this. It truly was a gift, a little challenging to bring my thoughts and my beliefs, to weave my daily life, both professional and personal, into his word. So I thank you. So Wednesday, I went to hear a really moving talk by an author, Christopher DeFink, and the title of his book, The Power of the Powerless, had really grabbed me. And he kept calling out the title of a children's book, Brown Bear, What Do You See? And by doing that, he was showing us how much we miss by seeing with just our eyes. The tattered, homeless lady on the park bench. If that's all we see, we miss her whole life story. Or in his case, his severely brain-damaged brother. To quote him, Oliver still remains the most hopeless person I ever met, the weakest human being I ever met. And yet he was one of the most powerful human beings I ever met. Oliver could do absolutely nothing except breathe, sleep, eat, and yet he was responsible for action, love, courage, insight. But what do we see? Being the youngest in my family, I spent a lot of time with relatives, especially my aunt and uncle, Honey and John. My aunt is why I went into social work. She was kind and smart, and she would let nothing keep her down, not even being blind, as was her husband. She went for advanced degrees. She became the director of home services for the New Jersey Commission for the Blind. Amazing woman. And as I got older, a whopping 5th grade I think I started, I would travel with these two people, and people were fascinated by this little child guiding two blind people around. And what confused me initially, and honestly, later, irritated me, was how many people treated them like they were invalids. Yet they lived in their own home, and they cooked and cleaned and worked professional jobs, and lived very, very full lives. They caught mass transit in the morning, and as technology advanced, they could do more and more. Like they were the first people I knew who had a home computer that could actually read their mail aloud. All this to say, since spending so much time traveling around to amazing places, being their eyes, I came to see the world differently. I was challenged to explain what I saw, especially in Alaska. But in doing so, I saw Alaska differently. I didn't want to miss one nuanced detail, because if I did, so did they. But as I was busily absorbing the world through my eyes, they taught me to hear and touch my world also. I always remember my sightless aunt saying she thought it would be so much worse to be deaf, that it would be so isolating. So in his book, Mr. DeVink said, "For me to have been brought up in a house where tragedy was turned to joy explains to a great degree why I am the type of husband, father, writer, teacher that I have become." And for me to have been blessed with so much time and travels with my awesome, inspiring aunt taught me to see, hear, and feel the world so richly. So what did the crowd see in Bartimaeus? They probably wouldn't have seen him at all if he didn't keep crying out. And then they tried to hush him. But though blind, he seemed to see so much more than those around him. He knew who he was in the presence of and just what Jesus could do and just what he really needed, God's mercy. Well, for me, I have to be honest, I found it all a little humbling because I have to tell you, as I read it, I have to admit, I would probably be part of the crowd. And that living in this really precarious world right now, my faith can feel pretty fragile. The very faith that healed Bartimaeus. Which brings me to 21 years of interfaith, where I keep learning from all the Bartimaeuses that show up, that have come along on my path with me. And just in case there's anyone here who doesn't know about interfaith, I'm going to give you the who, what, when, where, why of it, my abbreviated. So why? Why do we need interfaith in our community? Because the average two-bedroom in Ocean County is $14.65 and minimum wage is $8.60. So in order to afford that, you need 3.5 full-time jobs, which equals 140 hours a week, leaving 28 hours to eat, sleep, and raise your children. That's if you can find 3.5 jobs. And if you want to do this on one job, you would need to find one that pays you over $28 an hour. So who do we serve? We serve working poor families with children who are doing really vital jobs in our community. And how do we do that? 11 congregations, just like St. Mary's, with over 1,000 volunteers for 1 week on a rotating basis. So 4 or 5 times a year, our families call St. Mary's home. And now for the what. For 21 years, families have been staying in churches just like here. And every night, volunteers have brought in light and love into our families' lives by filling many, many different roles. It's really amazing what we can do together. And starting on December 9th is Host Week here. So, can you make dinner? Can you host dinner with our guests? Or literally, can you just come and go to sleep? Could you read a book to a sleepy 3-year-old? Or attempt homework with a middle schooler? Or listen to a single mom's heartbreak? Or celebrate with a dad as he's starting a new job? All these vital roles create a home for our families. Over 200 people on any given night are experiencing homelessness right here in our county, sleeping in cars, on couches, or maybe right here at St. Mary's. In serving our guests over these years, we've learned a lot, and we found better ways to serve them with things like financial and career counseling, a parent support group, or continuing the walk with them as mentors. A retired teacher works with the parents in a program that she created and calls Imagine, to address the word gap and literacy issues for the children, but impacting not just those children's lives, but generational poverty. And most recently, a volunteer started a nutrition program, which includes growing a garden and how to cook healthy on a budget. But one of my all-time favorites, because it's facilitated by women who have come through program to support women who are in program and each other, and they named it Empower. This and so much more we have learned from our guests. A couple weeks ago, I was training 25 new volunteers, and one of my coordinators had made this awesome spread, and she stayed to help me. Her presence changed a lot of lives that day, including mine, by her sharing her humbling experience interfaith. So a mom and a son were back for a second time hosting at their church. And Vita said, oh, the first week the mom would walk in the door, right past everyone, and go to their room, leaving her son with the volunteers. Vita, a retired teacher, did what teachers do. She did homework and played games and just spent time with this boy. But truly, in the back of her mind, she said, I was thinking, really? But this host week, the mom immediately approached Vita and thanked her and all the volunteers. Because she said her first time through, she was so depressed and overwhelmed, all she could do was walk in the door and go to her room. But because she knew the volunteers took such good care of her son, she could do that and go curl up into a ball and just sob. She said, I had no place else where I could weep without him hearing me. Who knew? But for 21 years, people have been creating a loving space for our families, just like hers, to heal. So I hope you'll find a way to join this incredible team of volunteers. I know Jesse and Mike and Lynn will have a role for you. And whatever you choose to do, you will change lives. And after you do, you can't help but see the world differently. So I thank you. I thank you all for blessing our families' lives.
Thank you, Patti. And be assured not only of our continued volunteerism, but